Your neighbor with the vegetable garden just became more dangerous than the CEO down the street. When civilization crumbles, the power hierarchy flips so violently that today's elite become tomorrow's servants. 7 specific personality types will rise from the ashes, and one of them is hiding in plain sight. When everything falls apart, most people freeze. They stand around waiting for someone else to fix things, or they waste precious time debating what to do next. But there's always that one person who immediately starts moving. They're not thinking about tomorrow's problems, they're solving today's survival puzzle right now. These are the ruthless survivors. And here's what makes them terrifying. They've already accepted that the old rules don't apply anymore. While others are still processing the shock of collapsed systems, ruthless survivors are counting resources. Food, water, shelter, weapons. They mentally catalog everything within reach. They don't get sentimental about sharing when supplies run low. Makes sense, right? Dead people can't help anyone. History backs this up in brutal detail. During the 1992 siege of Sarajevo, people who survived the longest weren't the nicest or most generous. They were the ones who hoarded essentials early, made hard choices fast, and never hesitated to protect what they had. When neighbors started starving, survivors felt bad about it, but they didn't give up their hidden food stashes. The weird part is how quickly they adapt to violence. Most people spend their whole lives avoiding confrontation. Ruthless survivors flip that switch immediately when resources become scarce. They'll fight over a can of beans like it's made of gold, because in their world, it basically is. But they're not mindless bullies. Actually, they're often scary smart about picking their battles. They know when to be aggressive and when to retreat. They form temporary alliances when it benefits them, then cut ties the moment those partnerships become liabilities. Cold? Absolutely. Effective? The survival rates don't lie. Here's where it gets interesting, though. These people often become the foundation of whatever comes next. They're the ones who establish the first camps, set the initial boundaries, and create the basic power structures that everyone else eventually follows. They're not building utopia, but they are building something that works. Then there's their decision-making speed. While committees are still forming to discuss options, ruthless survivors have already moved to higher ground, secured water sources, and identified potential threats. They operate on instinct sharpened by pure necessity. Every choice is life or death. So overthinking becomes a luxury they literally can't afford. What's fascinating is how they handle other survivors. They're not automatically hostile, they're calculating. Can this person contribute something useful? Do they have skills, supplies, or information worth keeping them alive? It's harsh math, but it's still math. And the brutal truth? In every major collapse throughout history, from economic crashes to natural disasters, the people who rose to power first were almost always the ones willing to make choices others couldn't stomach. They grabbed control while everyone else was still hoping things would go back to normal. Of course, being first doesn't guarantee long-term success. Raw survival instinct can get you through the initial chaos, but rebuilding civilization requires different skills entirely. That's where other types of survivors start becoming incredibly valuable. Some focus on creating rather than just taking. While the ruthless survivors are busy fighting over what's left, there's another group quietly turning rubble into refuge. These are the resourceful builders, the ones who look at a broken world and see endless possibilities. You know that friend who can fix your car with a paperclip and some duct tape? They're basically gods after civilization falls apart. When everyone else is panicking about broken infrastructure, builders are already sketching solutions on whatever surface they can find. A collapsed bridge becomes salvageable steel beams. Abandoned buildings transform into fortified compounds. Even shopping carts get converted into mobile workshops. But here's what separates true builders from weekend DIY warriors. They think in systems, not just repairs. While you're trying to patch a leaky roof, they're designing rainwater collection that feeds into a filtration system that connects to underground storage tanks. Makes sense, right? They're not just surviving, they're creating the foundation for everyone else's survival. The really smart builders understand that old world engineering principles still work in new world chaos. Gravity doesn't care if the government collapsed. Water still flows downhill. Leverage still multiplies force. These fundamentals become their secret weapons when creating everything from simple pulleys for moving heavy debris to complex gear systems for generating power from wind or water. Then, There's their almost supernatural ability to see potential in junk. That pile of twisted metal you walked past, they spotted 3 different tool possibilities and building materials for a water pump. Broken electronics aren't trash. They're component libraries waiting to be harvested. Old tires become everything from planters to shock absorbers for makeshift machinery. What's fascinating is how quickly these settlements become magnets for other survivors. Word spreads fast when someone has running water, secure walls, and functional workshops. Before long, builders find themselves accidentally creating the new town centers of a collapsed world. People trade food, information, and skills just to stay near functioning infrastructure. The psychological advantage runs deeper than most people realize. When everything feels broken and hopeless, being around someone who builds and fixes things provides incredible emotional stability. It's hard to despair about the future when you're watching someone construct solutions right in front of you. That optimism becomes infectious, turning demoralized refugees into motivated community members. And the weird part is, builders often become leaders without even trying. Not through force or charisma, but through pure necessity. When your shelter needs expanding and your water system needs upgrading, you naturally defer to the person who knows how these things work. Authority flows to competence in ways that would make political scientists weep. Smart builders also understand the multiplication effect. They don't just build things, they teach others to build. Every person they train becomes a force multiplier for the community's capabilities. Within months, what started as one person with good hands-on skills transforms into a network of capable problem solvers. Of course, building things is only half the challenge. Protecting what you've built requires an entirely different skill set, one that often determines whether these carefully constructed havens survive or crumble under pressure from less peaceful neighbors. When everything falls apart and bullets start flying, you know what becomes more valuable than gold? Someone who can keep you from bleeding out. Medical professionals aren't just helpful in a collapse. They become walking insurance policies that everyone wants on their team. Here's the thing about medics in survival scenarios. They're the ultimate trump card. While others are hoarding canned beans and ammunition, these people are sitting on knowledge that literally keeps humans functioning. A skilled medic can turn a death sentence into a minor setback with the right techniques and some creativity. But we're not talking about your average hospital doctor who panics without an MRI machine. The medics who thrive in chaos are the ones who understand trauma care. The gritty, hands-on stuff that saves lives when there's no backup coming. They know how to stop severe bleeding with improvised tourniquets, perform emergency surgery on kitchen tables, and treat infections before they turn deadly. These aren't theoretical skills from medical school. They're practical techniques that work when civilization isn't around to help. Then, there's the pharmaceutical reality. When the supply chains collapse and pharmacies get looted, what happens to people who depend on daily medications? Smart medics already know which plants can substitute for common drugs. They understand that willow bark contains compounds similar to aspirin, that certain molds can fight infections, and that honey isn't just for tea, it's a natural antiseptic that never expires. The weird part is how quickly medical knowledge becomes political power. In small survivor groups, the person who decides who gets treated first essentially controls life and death decisions. That's influence money can't buy. Leaders emerge, but medics become indispensable. You can replace a fighter or a builder, but finding someone who knows how to reset bones and treat pneumonia, that's irreplaceable. Medical professionals also excel at something most people overlook, teaching others. They can train regular folks to handle basic first aid, recognize symptoms, and assist with procedures. This multiplies their effectiveness and creates loyalty among group members who now possess life-saving skills themselves. Makes sense, right? Let's not forget the psychological advantage medics bring. When people know medical help is available, they take more calculated risks. They're willing to venture out for supplies, defend their territory, or explore new areas because they're not constantly terrified that a simple injury means certain death. This confidence translates into better resource gathering and stronger group dynamics. Well, here's where it gets interesting. Medics understand human anatomy in ways that extend beyond healing. They know pressure points, understand how bodies fail under stress, and can assess physical capabilities accurately. These skills prove valuable for more than just medical emergencies. History backs this up completely. During every major disaster, the communities that organized around medical knowledge survived at higher rates. The groups that protected their medics and learned from them outlasted those who focused solely on weapons or food storage. But even the most skilled medics need resources to work with, and that's where another type of survivor becomes crucial. Those who know how to find and grow exactly what everyone needs to stay alive. The medics can patch you up when disaster strikes, but who's going to feed everyone when the grocery stores are empty? Enter the practical growers and foragers, the people who turn weeds into dinner and dirt into gardens. These aren't your weekend hobby gardeners. They're the ones who know that dandelions are actually packed with vitamins, that acorns can be turned into flour, and that cattails growing by the pond are basically nature's supermarket. While everyone else is fighting over the last can of beans, growers are already planning next season's harvest. Here's what separates them from the rest. They understand timing. Plant too early? Frost kills everything. Wait too long? No food before winter. They read weather patterns like others read newspapers. They know which berries ripen when, where the best fishing spots hide, and how to make terrible soil productive again. But the real magic happens with foraging. A skilled forager can walk through what looks like empty wilderness and come back with a full meal, and they spot edible mushrooms that others would never notice. Well, let's just say the difference between dinner and death is often one misidentified fungus. Then there's the sustainability angle. These people don't just take, they give back. They know how to harvest without destroying the source. Fish population low this year, they switch to different areas or methods. Berries getting scarce, they plant more bushes and wait. It's patient work, but it pays off when others have stripped their resources bare. The practical growers also master companion planting. Beans add nitrogen to soil that corn needs. Marigolds keep pests away from tomatoes. Three Sisters planting corn, beans, and squash together has kept Native American communities fed for centuries. Makes sense, right? Why fight nature when you can work with it? And here's the thing about fishing and hunting knowledge. It's not just about knowing where animals go. Smart foragers understand migration patterns, breeding seasons, and feeding habits. They know that fish bite differently depending on weather pressure, that rabbits create specific trails, and that tracking becomes easier after rain. During the Irish potato famine, communities with diversified food knowledge survive better than those dependent on single crops. Same pattern repeats everywhere. The Great Depression, families who knew wild edibles and could grow victory gardens weathered it better. Natural disasters consistently prove that food security beats gold in your pocket. But why does this matter more than having weapons or medical skills? Simple. You can fight off attackers and heal injuries, but you can't survive long without calories. History shows us that groups with reliable food sources become magnets for others. They build the strongest alliances because everyone needs to eat. The weird part is how much food actually grows wild around us. Urban foragers find edible plants in city parks, abandoned lots, and along highways. Suburban growers turn lawns into food forests. Rural experts know every edible plant for miles. While defenders plan for battles and traders negotiate deals, these practical food providers are quietly solving the most basic human need. Because when hunger sets in, even the toughest fighters become desperate, and desperate people make dangerous choices. When everything falls apart, you need someone watching your back. The tough defenders aren't just good with weapons. They're the reason groups survive while others get wiped out completely. Here's what makes them different from weekend warriors playing dress-up. Real defenders think 3 steps ahead. They don't just know how to shoot, they understand fields of fire, choke points, and how to make attackers regret showing up. A skilled defender can turn a simple farmhouse into a fortress using nothing but furniture and barbed wire. They see weak spots others miss entirely. But wait, it gets more interesting. The best defenders aren't necessarily ex-military. Sometimes it's the quiet neighbor who spent years hunting, or the woman who grew up on a ranch fixing fences and dealing with predators. They've got something you can't teach in boot camp: patience mixed with ruthless timing. Let's talk weapons for a second. Forget the Hollywood nonsense. Defenders know that a reliable bow beats a fancy rifle when ammunition runs out. They understand traps, improvised explosives, and how to make attackers think twice before coming back. A good defender can rig early warning systems using tin cans and fishing line that work better than expensive electronic sensors. Then, there's the psychological game. Smart defenders don't just fight, they prevent fights from happening. They make their territory look too dangerous to mess with. Dead animals hung on fences, strategic noise at night, rumors spread through trading networks about what happened to the last group that tried something stupid. Studies from past disasters paint a clear picture. Armed groups controlled roughly 80% of valuable resources within 6 months of major collapses. Not because they hoarded everything, but because they could protect what they had while others lost theirs to raiders and opportunists. The unarmed groups, most didn't make it past the first winter. And the weird part is, good defenders often become natural leaders without trying. People gravitate towards safety. When you're the person standing between a group and the dangers outside, others start looking to you for decisions about everything else too. Makes sense, right? Well, here's where it gets tricky. Defenders face a constant balancing act. Too aggressive, and you become the raiders you're fighting against. Too passive, and you invite attacks. The best ones know when to negotiate, when to show force, and when to actually use it. They understand that reputation travels faster than bullets. But even the toughest defender has limitations. They can't be everywhere at once. They need supplies, ammunition, and backup. Most importantly, they need something worth defending, which means they depend heavily on the builders, medics, and growers to create value worth protecting. The reality? Defenders buy time and space for everyone else to work. They're the shield that lets others focus on growing food, treating injuries, and building better shelters. Without them, all those other skills become pretty useless when the wrong people show up. However, pure defense only gets you so far. Eventually, you need to acquire new resources, make deals, and expand your influence. That's where a completely different type of survivor becomes essential. When civilization crumbles, guess who suddenly becomes the most important person in the room? Not the politician, not the celebrity. It's the guy who knows how to trade a broken radio for 3 cans of beans and somehow comes out ahead. These people see opportunity where others see junk. That rusted bicycle chain, perfect for bartering with the mechanic who needs it for his generator. Those expired batteries, still worth something to someone desperate enough. Shrewd traders don't just survive, they thrive because they understand a simple truth. Everything has value to somebody. But here's what makes them really dangerous. They don't just trade objects, they trade information, favors, and connections. Today's enemy might be tomorrow's business partner, so they never burn bridges completely. Smart, right? The Venezuelan economic collapse showed this perfectly. While others panicked, traders quickly figured out that cigarettes were worth more than cash. Coffee became currency. Even toilet paper turned into gold. Those who adapted fastest didn't just survive, they built small empires from their living rooms. Then there's the network effect. One trader knows another trader who knows a farmer who knows a guy with medical supplies. Before you know it, they've got a web of contacts spanning hundreds of miles. When your kid gets sick and you need antibiotics, guess who you're calling? These folks also create something crucial: neutral ground. Trading posts become unofficial peace zones where even rival groups can meet safely. Makes sense, right? Nobody wants to shoot up the only place where they can get what they need. Violence is bad for business. Well, here's where it gets interesting. Successful traders often become accidental leaders. People start coming to them not just for goods, but for advice, dispute resolution, and planning. They know who has what, who needs what, and how to make deals happen. That's power. And the weird part is they're usually the calmest people during chaos. While others are hoarding, traders are calculating. They understand that scarcity creates opportunity. The more desperate people become, the more willing they are to trade valuable items for basic necessities. History backs this up completely. After World War II, cigarette economies emerged across Europe. During the Great Depression, barter networks kept entire communities fed. Even in ancient times, merchants were often the first to establish new settlements because they knew where resources were and how to move them efficiently. But successful trading requires something most people lack: emotional detachment. You can't get sentimental about your grandmother's jewelry when it could save your family. Tough choices, but traders make them without hesitation. The really clever ones also understand timing. They know when to hold on to supplies and when to flood the market. When everyone's desperate for water, they've already secured multiple sources. When the panic dies down, they're ready for the next shortage. However, even the shrewdest trader faces one massive challenge: keeping their success from making them a target. All those resources and connections mean nothing if you can't protect them. That's where another type of survivor becomes absolutely essential. When everything falls apart and people are scared, confused, and desperate, someone always steps up to take charge. Not the guy with the biggest muscles or the most supplies, the person who knows how to talk. Leaders emerge from chaos not because they're appointed, but because others choose to follow them. These persuasive leaders have something most people lack during a crisis: the ability to make others believe things will get better. They're the ones who walk into a group of panicking strangers and somehow convince them to work together instead of fighting over the last can of beans. And the weird part is, half the time, they don't even have a real plan. They just sound like they do. History backs this up perfectly. During the Great Depression, local community leaders who could organize soup kitchens and work programs became more powerful than wealthy businessmen who'd lost everything. When Hurricane Katrina hit, neighborhood leaders who coordinated rescue efforts and resource sharing kept their communities alive, while official help was nowhere to be found. But here's what makes these leaders really dangerous. They understand human psychology under pressure. They know when to be tough and when to show compassion. When food runs low, they're the ones deciding who gets fed first. When someone breaks the group's rules, they determine the punishment. They don't just manage resources, they manage hope and fear. Let's not forget the dark side of this power. Persuasive leaders can easily become dictators when there's no government to stop them. They start by solving problems and keeping everyone safe. Then they begin making rules that benefit them more than others. Before anyone realizes what's happening, the helpful leader has become the controlling boss who decides everything. Then there's the communication advantage these leaders possess. While others struggle to express their needs or coordinate with neighboring groups, natural leaders can negotiate. They set up trade agreements, form alliances, and sometimes prevent wars between competing communities. When two groups are about to fight over a water source, the leader finds a way to share it. Smart leaders also know how to delegate. They don't try to do everything themselves because that's impossible and exhausting. Instead, they identify the builders, medics, growers, and defenders in their group, then put them in charge of what they do best. This creates a functioning society faster than any other approach. What's fascinating is how these leaders handle information. They control what the group knows about outside threats, available resources, and future plans. Sometimes they share everything to build trust. Other times they keep secrets to prevent panic. This information management becomes their most powerful tool for maintaining control. The key difference between leaders who help their groups thrive and those who destroy them comes down to one thing: whether they serve the group or expect the group to serve them. The good ones understand their job is making everyone else successful. The bad ones see everyone else as tools for their own success. Yet even the most controlling leaders need to stay alert because there are always those watching from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to challenge their authority or simply disappear into the wasteland. Everyone talks about leaders, fighters, and builders when disaster strikes, but there's a group nobody thinks about until it's too late. The forgotten ones, the hermits living in cabins miles from civilization, the weird neighbor everyone avoided, that guy who got fired and disappeared into the woods 5 years ago. These people seem helpless, right? Wrong. When society collapses, the forgotten outsiders become invisible gold mines of survival. They've been practicing isolation for years while you were worried about your Wi-Fi password. They know every abandoned building in a 50-mile radius, every water source nobody else remembers, every hidden trail that bypasses the main roads where desperate people set up roadblocks. Here's what makes them dangerous. They're already used to having nothing. While others panic about losing their comfortable lives, hermits just continue their Tuesday routine. No adjustment period needed. They've been living off-grid since before it was trendy on YouTube. Their biggest concern isn't learning to survive, it's deciding whether to help the same people who called them crazy. But here's where it gets interesting. These loners often become accidental resource hoarders. That hermit's cabin, probably stuffed with canned goods, medical supplies, and tools he's been collecting for decades. The abandoned factory he calls home might have machinery nobody else knows how to operate, or rare materials everyone needs but can't find. The weird part is how they think. Years of solitude create problem solvers who approach challenges differently. While groups argue about the right way to do things, outsiders just try weird solutions that somehow work. They'll use car parts to build water filters, turn shopping carts into mobile shelters, create weapons from hardware store scraps that would make engineers jealous. Then, there's their psychological advantage. Most people crack under isolation after a few weeks. These folks have been alone for years and stayed sane. Well, mostly sane. They don't need constant social interaction to function. Don't need group approval to make decisions. When everyone else is dealing with cabin fever and group conflicts, hermits are thinking clearly about real problems. Location knowledge becomes their secret weapon. They know which buildings have structural problems, which areas flood during heavy rain, where to find food when obvious sources run dry. Information that took them years to gather through trial and error. Makes sense, right? Eventually, even the strongest groups hit walls they can't break through alone. Maybe they need to cross dangerous territory. Maybe their water source dries up. Maybe they're missing one specific skill or tool. That's when someone remembers the crazy person living in that old barn, the one who knows things nobody else does. History backs this up. Every major disaster produces stories of unlikely survivors who seemed least prepared but lasted longest. The key isn't having the most resources or the biggest group. Sometimes it's about having nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Smart leaders start thinking about these overlooked survivors early, because when the dust settles and new communities form, the forgotten ones hold cards nobody saw coming.